Hello, mutes and musicians, my name is TBSky, and I have taken about 135 attempts at recording this video. All of them have gone wrong for various reasons, so at this point, I'm just here to say, screw it. I'm not gonna do the fancy intro I had planned. I'm not gonna try and do all kinds of bells and whistles. I'm just gonna get through it, because something you learn as a creative professional is that done is a million times better than perfect. So what's the deal with Sona? She's a very old champion from all the way back in 2010. She's been a part of League of Legends for a very long time, but in all that time, she's never really been touched, as it were. Her lore today is pretty much the same lore that she launched with, and outside of perhaps some texture updates or, I guess, a few animation updates here and there, she hasn't really been touched in terms of her character design or in terms of how she expresses herself. In fact, she has some lines still in her voice kit that are a little bit anachronistic because they still mention summoners. And the concept behind being able to hear her voice at all is that you are a summoner who can hear her mind, because that used to be the gameplay concept. This is something that has stuck around even as the rest of the summoners and the Institute of War got redacted. Now, if you can maybe tell that I'm having a little bit of trouble speaking right now, and that's because I have a blister on my tongue, which hurts a lot, and which makes my mouth water all the time, which means sometimes I end up either having to swallow or slurring my words, and this is part of what's been causing me so much trouble making this gosh darn video. But at this point, I'm ready to accept it. I tried cutting things together, I tried doing things in segments, nothing worked, I lost the thread of my thoughts, I couldn't do the things, so this time we're gonna do it the old-fashioned way, which means a little bit crappier, but finished. In order to talk about Sona's character design, we should talk about her lore, and that's actually pretty easy because she doesn't have much. This is pretty much the extent of it. This, fairly short, perfectly decent, but very, very brief bit of biography is all the lore that remains that's associated with Sona in particular. She doesn't really have any lore connections to other characters in the game. She doesn't really have any strong connections to any of the factions in-game. In fact, she's a combination Ionian and Demacian champion, a fairly rare breed in the new state of League of Legends lore, where Riot have been very busy trying to sort and organize everybody sort of more strictly into their respective factions. Swallowing some spit there. So, to talk about her character design, let's just actually read her lore from start to finish so that everybody's on the same page once we start talking about the visuals. Sona has no memory of her true parents. As an infant, she was found abandoned on the doorstep of an Ionian adoption house, nestled atop an ancient instrument in an exquisite case of unknown origins. She was an unusually well-behaved child, always quiet and content. Her caretakers were sure she would find a home quickly, but it soon became apparent that what they mistook for uncommon geniality was actually an inability to speak or to produce any sound whatsoever. Sona remained at the adoption house until her teens, watching in hopeless silence as prospective adopters passed her by. During this time, her caretakers sold her unusual instrument to anxious collectors, hoping to build her a trust. For a myriad of bizarre and unexpected reasons, however, it would be returned, or simply appear again, outside the house. When a wealthy Demacian woman named Lestara Bouvel learned of the instrument, she immediately embarked to Ionia. When the caretakers showcased the instrument for her, she rose wordlessly and explored the house, stopping outside Sona's room. Without hesitation, Lestara adopted her and left a generous donation for the instrument. With Lestara's guidance, Sona discovered a deep connection with the instrument, which Lestara called an Advil, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. In her hands, it played tones which stilled or quivered the hearts of those around her. Within months, she was headlining with the mysterious Advil for sold-out audiences. She played as though plucking heartstrings, effortlessly manipulating the emotions of her listeners, all without a single written note. In secret, she discovered a potent and deadly use for her Advil, using its vibrations to slice objects from a distance. She honed this discipline in private, mastering her gift, that she might be prepared should a fitting recital require the harmony of her talents. So, Sona's lore is fairly basic. She's a mysterious orphan who gets left with a magical instrument that seems to be tied to her with some kind of mystical bond, and where did she come from? Where did she go? Where did she come from, Cotton Eye Joe? Nobody seems to know. And that's sort of part of her backstory, is that it's kind of setting up this story thread whereby it might be something we can do in the future to explore Sona's origins, where she came from, why she has the mystical instrument, like why is it tied to her with some kind of magical bond that means she can't lose it. And the second thread that's being set up is a threat around Lestara Bouvel, this wealthy Demacian woman who seems to know almost instinctively, or perhaps because of some secret lore that she knows, what's up with Sona, what's up with her instrument, why does it work this way, why is she connected to it, why is it so necessary that she learn how to play it. Nobody knows. There's really no exploration of what that is, so that's another thread that in a future lore update, if Riot had ever done any, that could be explored and discovered. Now, Sona is old enough that she has what's called a League Judgment, which was an old piece of fiction that used to be released alongside Champions that explored the joining ritual for the League of Legends, like the ceremony that they had to go through in order to become champions on the fields of justice. Sona's version, and all of them are about a summoner, a powerful magician, diving into the minds of the champions and exploring their fears and sort of their inner anxieties and their secret reasons for joining the league. And Sona's version is this kind of nightmare scenario where her instrument and her musical power kind of goes off on its own, and it hurts and even kills Lestara Bouvel, her adopted mother. And it hints as this idea that Sona, besides being a person who can't talk, but who learns to express themselves through music, which is a very old poetic, ironic trope, she's also someone who's kind of afraid of her power, someone for whom the power represents a type of conflict, another swallow there, and that she has some doubts and some fears about what this power means for her and why it's a part of her. But again, the League judgments are all outdated and aren't really canon to the lore anymore, and nothing was ever done to explore this lore further. And that's really one of my major criticisms of Sona, as well as many other League of Legends champions, is that Riot has had a bit of a tendency, in fact, it's been a pattern, in fact, I think it's been an intentional policy, to release a champion, to write them some origins, set up some story threads, all kinds of things that you could explore, that you could do with a champion, and then never ever actually do anything about it ever again. That's a bother. It annoys me, especially for a champion who's like 8 years old. Like, there's been time to do it, Riot, and she did some interesting stuff to explore there. The musical cultures of Runeterra. That's something that none of the other champions can really offer any insight into. What's music like in Runeterra? What does it mean socially? What does it mean for people? What does it mean for someone for whom music is their only avenue of expression? Like, there's a bunch of good stuff to explore there in terms of world building that they never really did, and that is annoying, and it's a major criticism I have of League of Legends lore in general. So, Sona's character design. If you want to talk about Sona's character design, there's, well, the most obvious thing about her is, well, it's obvious. It's right there. You can see it immediately. The most important thing about Sona's character design is her two huge pigtails. They are, depending on whether you're feeling particularly generous or nasty, either a visual homage or a ripoff of Hatsune Miku from Vocaloid. But whether that's true or not, and I think it probably is, because Riot has been known to take inspiration from other popular fictional franchises in order to form some of the design basis for their champions, especially in the olden days where that was almost the entire concept behind the game, to take all these archetypes and visual signifiers from other things and throw them all together in a kind of melting pot. Yeah, so much trouble speaking. I would have ended this attempt to take 4 or 5 tries ago, by the way. The pigtails, however, the visual reference to Hatsune Miku, which I think it is, doesn't impact the design particularly, however, because Hatsune Miku is a Vocaloid. She's a robot that sings, she's connected to tech, she's connected to internet culture, she's connected to all these modern concepts, while Sona is someone who can't sing and who isn't connected to any kind of tech whatsoever. She's a very old-fashioned, in fact, an almost medieval concept. So the overlap between the two characters isn't really strong enough that I would call it something. Like, I don't think Sona gets extra points for being a visual reminiscence of Hatsune Miku. I don't think that's part of her success. What is part of her success, though, is the actual big thing about her character design. The actual big thing about her character design is her huge instrument. Her huge instrument. Now, it's called an Advil, and it's an instrument of Riot's own design, something they came up with themselves for this champion specifically. It's not a real instrument, but it's based on a class of Asian string instruments that exist all over the Asian subcontinent, and indeed I think some forms even make their ways to Europe. It's essentially a board upon which you nail some strings and then you tune them until they sound right, but Of course, it's a little more complicated than that because that's also the exact logical description of a guitar or a piano. In China, I believe these instruments are called, and I'm going to mispronounce this, gengshu, and in Japan they're called kotos, and I think I've seen variations from places like Thailand as well as numerous others, and it's functionally the same principle as piano, just without the hammers and the keys. Now, for all that Riot went to all this trouble of creating an instrument that was supposed to be some sort of vague fusion of various Asian musical cultures, the Advil itself is kinda bad. It doesn't really look much like anything, and this extends into her character model. I think her character model is kind of the worst in terms of these, because the design, the fleur-de-lis style sleek sort of bisected beveled designs that are on the front there, and the ornamental wings and the color, all of that to me makes it look mostly like some kind of 16th century French thing. Like, it looks like something Louis XIV would have had sitting in Versailles. It doesn't really look like it comes from Asia of any kind. Like the visual inspiration isn't really there. And that's not to say that Asian people couldn't build something like this, but that the design sensibility seems to be culled more from a Western set of sensibilities. The same thing goes for her Advil in her Splash, where it has a very different set of ornamentations, but they still look much more Celtic or even Greco-Roman inspired than particularly associated with the Ionian sort of Pan-Asian mashup that's supposed to embody that region. So, and this is kind of a big problem for Sona's character design, because the Advil is a really super important part of who she is. It's a really important part of her whole character concept, is that she's this girl for whom this instrument, this magical thing that's bonded to her with some kind of mystical connection, is the only way for her to access her power and truly express herself. It's the only way for her to be a champion, is this thing. This is supposed to be the place where she displays everything that she is about, but the thing itself, it doesn't really look like anything. Even the shape design is really weird. In the splash art in particular, it has this weird bulging, curving shape design that makes it look alternately really flimsy and really big, stocky, and bulky. And in her character model, it's much the same story. Like, just the shape of this thing is weird and unwieldy, and it doesn't look like you could sit it down if you wanted to. It doesn't look much like an instrument that, if it wasn't enchanted, could be practical. And it doesn't look much like an expression of Sona's personality, because it just has this gold color and, like, there's some wings on it. That's really the extent of the symbology associated with this thing. It has some wings on it symbolizing freedom. That's about it. And that's, when it's such a centerpiece of the character design, I don't really feel like that's enough. Another part of Sona's character design that acquits itself a lot better, though, is her color design. All the blue and all the gold that dominates her from head to toe is strongly associated with Demacia, or at least it used to be. Demacia nowadays seems to associate itself more with a white and gold color aesthetic, but back in the day, Demacia was much more in the realm of blue and gold. This is something you can see on display in the character models of characters like Garen and Lux. They have some blue and gold stuff going on there. And Sona, in that way, just from her color design, associates herself very well with the side of the good guys, the side of the Demacians. And from her robe design, although it is a little bit confused, like, it is just kind of a robe, the very long sort of hanging sleeves kind of put me in mind of kimono, which I think creates a bit of a visual association with Ionia. The same thing for her hair clips. They have this sort of vaguely pan-Asian aesthetic thing going on for him. Plus, they're a visual reference to Hatsune Miku, who is an extremely Japanese creation. So, like, there's a little bit of affinity there. Not a lot, but there is some. And that makes her stronger than, I think, a bunch of the character designs that were released around the same time for her. Unfortunately, there is a little bit of a nitpick I have with her. This right here, the stuff that's on her robe, embroidered in gold on her, is musical notation. Specifically, it's Western musical notation. And I learned this stuff in school when I was a kid, but I only learned it in Danish, so I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I think this is called a staff. I think it's G staff, and it's something that helps you determine what the key of a song is. And it's even more obvious in her actual character model. And down here we have, I think that's an F staff. I would not quote me on this because I'm not really good at musical theory. But these are musical notation symbols that are, first of all, from the real world, and second of all, they're from the West. I believe they're used nowadays in most regions around the world, or at least they're taught, but these are not the musical notation symbols. Like, they're not universal in our world, and they're not... Why would they know them in Runeterra? Like, why would they know them in the world of League of Legends? Why would they have the same notation system? And indeed, why would they be embroidered on the robes of an Ionian girl? Like, I would imagine if Runeterra is supposed to function at all, in any way, shape, or form, like the real world, then each nation would have its own musical culture, its own styles of musical learning and notation. Like, some places wouldn't have notation, they would have it transferred, you know, from bard to bard in the way of ancient times, while other places, scholarly places like Piltover and Demacia and indeed Noxus, would probably have systems of writing for music that helps transmit it. So what I'm trying to get at here is that if you wanted to embroider musical symbols on the robes of her, that's a really good idea, but then don't use real-world music, because that takes us out. That makes the character a visual reference to the real world. That makes her much more of that Hatsune Miku reference than it makes her a part of the League of Legends world. And I think that's... Maybe I'm the only one who's bothered by it, but it's the kind of thing that kind of gets to me a little bit because it breaks the world building. And it forces us to ask some interesting questions, like if they have the same musical notation in Runeterra that we have here in the real world, did they go through the same historical processes to reach that? Like, are we gonna get into a history of like monks and scholars and various writing systems from the Latin-speaking world being integrated and consolidated over time into a single musical notation system? Like, that system arose as a consequence of a set of circumstances that you can't just replicate in Fantasyland for no reason. Okay, so let's talk about her breasts. I'm not going to tease you about it this time. Unlike Janna, who we talked about last time, where I got annoyed that, like, Janna is supposed to be this wind goddess who is most of the time barely corporeal, like who isn't visible, who doesn't have a physical form, except when she uses all her powers to their maximum potential, like except when she uses essentially her ultimate. That's when she becomes truly, fully physically present. And for me, it was kind of annoying that then the character design they chose for her was that she flies around half naked all the time, because it makes her so obviously flesh and blood. It makes her look less divine and more mortal. And I got a bunch of pushback on that in the comments, which is fair. I never ask anyone to adopt my opinion, but that's why I had an issue with it, is that her being half naked is like, I don't care if she's sexy that much. That's not really the issue. The issue is that the mode that they chose to express it in conflicts with my idea of what her character design is supposed to be communicating. For Sona, it's kind of a different story, because I don't really mind that she's busty. I don't really mind that she's sexy. Like, she's a performer, she's a musician, she's someone who performs on stage and who enthralls people. Like, that's part of her character story, is that she's someone who's able to spellbind people with her music. And, like, integrating that by making her tremendously attractive is not... I mean, it's not super creative, but it's not the worst way that you can do it. I'd be more interested to see alternate takes on it, but it's not a problem. Like, it's a little bit in the context of League of Legends, that the busty, sexy, hourglass-shaped lady is a character archetype that is, let's put it mildly, overrepresented in that game. Like, there's a whole lot of that exact body type going on in League of Legends, and that just gets boring after a while, especially back in 2010, it was getting really boring. So I think it would be more interesting if they ever go back and rework her, that they come up with something new, like that they come up with a different visual idea for how to show her, like give her exceptionally long fingers, long arms, like do something interesting with her physicality, instead of just making her a gorgeous babe and putting her in a costume. But like I say, it's not a problem, really. Like, it works, it's fine. It's not great, but it's fine. There was something else I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, by the way, there is a possible reason for the very, let's call it, open nature of the upper areas of her outfit. One of the classic visual signifiers of honesty. Like if portrait painters from the classical and Renaissance eras wanted to communicate that a person is forthright, open, and honest, what they would often do is that they would expose their chest to whatever degree was appropriate at the time. They would open their coats and just sort of open up their body language and really sort of, here I am, everything is exposed, you can see exactly who I am. And that kind of works for Sona, because she's someone for whom communication was difficult, really hard. She couldn't express herself, she couldn't use language in the way that everybody else could use it until she found her music. And her music opened her up, it gave her a voice, as it were, a way to express herself, a way to reach out and communicate that wasn't available to her before. And this idea of opening up the chest area, as it were, of giving her this bare chest, these bare shoulders, and this bare throat, it kind of works as a visual signification of this, like that her voice has been freed. Consequently, like the other end of the scale, if you wanted to do a character design of Sona when she was still restrained, when she didn't have her instrument, when she was mute, one of the things I would do is I would give her a really tight collar around the neck, like a shirt that just goes all the way up and just closes around her throat, that really kind of shuts her in, that closes her off, to sort of signify that she cannot speak, she cannot get anything off her chest, essentially. So in that sense, there's a reason why it might work, but like I said, it's like, then they chose to give her very large breasts that don't really interact with her that much, and it's like, you have to ask the question of, was this something they intended? Was the character designer thinking along my same lines, that it's about giving visual signifiers for freedom of ability to communicate and of being opened up, or is it just because they wanted to put some titties on the screen? And there's nothing wrong with wanting to put some titties on the screen. I want to make that pretty clear. Like, if you want to make a sexy character with big titties and a big ass or whatever, it's not a crime. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's a point of criticism. When you do that, instead of doing something else, then your choice is open to criticism. In this case, I would criticize it for being, in the context of League of Legends, just kind of lazy and unoriginal. And I think they could have done better on that front. Anyway, I am done with this frickin' video. Thank you very much for watching and sitting through my constant little pauses and the botched words that came out and stuff like that. If you've enjoyed this video, you are a generous soul, and I thank you very much. There's a like button down below that you can click. If you want to support the channel and gain access to the channel Discord and the ability to vote on future topics for videos, as well as a bunch of other rewards that you can read about on the Patreon itself, there's a link in the description. If you can't do that, or if you're not able, if you're not willing to do that, that's completely okay. I get more support than I could ever possibly have hoped for already, and while I wouldn't mind more support in the same way that, you know, a thirsty person wouldn't mind more water, it's just, thank you to the people who support this channel already. Thank you very much. It's been more than I could ever hope for, and I'm so glad I get to do this and be very slightly successful at it. When my tongue isn't plaguing me with that goddamn blister. There's a dislike button down below if you have been kind of annoyed by all of this. And I'm not going to make up some silly story about why you shouldn't press it today, because frankly, I think it's fair enough. My name has been TBSkyne. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you, I hope, in the next video with a tongue that isn't constantly trying to murder me.